often shocked by news from Ukraine, and the destruction of the Nova Kakhovka dam now threatens a humanitarian catastrophe. The weight of evidence points to deliberate sabotage, and tens of thousands of people live in the path of the waters that have been unleashed. The destruction coincided with the beginning of a Ukrainian counter-offensive against Russian occupiers in the south and east. We can get the latest from GB News' Tim Smith in Kiev. Tim, good to have you down the line there. We are hearing that 2,000 metres of territory have been captured by the Ukrainians in the area of Bakhmut. Is that claim supported?
That is correct, Michael, and good morning, good afternoon to all of your viewers. About 1.2 kilometres is what I have been informed that they have taken. They liberated a village in Donetsk just this morning, which they're very excited about. Look, this war is still, you would have to say, a stalemate, but the Ukrainians are holding the line, and their counter-offensive is going to plan, I'm told. Now, they're pretty clever. They're not showing all their cards, obviously, and I think that this counter-offensive will go on throughout the summer. But they need more Western material. They need more tanks. They need more trucks. They need more ammunition. And the problem is that because the West has, and particularly Britain, has done a magnificent job in supporting the Ukrainian war effort, but because the West has stuffed around now for some months, particularly with F-16 fighters and other aircraft, it's given the Russians time to regroup. And the problem is that they've dug in literally like World War II. And the Russians are going to be very difficult to dislodge from the rest of the Ukrainian territory that they've stolen illegally. And we need to give them all that we can to drive the Russians out of their land.
Tim, on that very point, you sound a bit nervous about the advance. And I wonder whether Ukrainians, although they'll be euphoric that they are counterattacking, will also be very anxious, because when you're counterattacking very entrenched positions held by the enemy, the risk of casualties is extraordinarily high.
Well, exactly, Michael. I mean, you're a former defence secretary. You understand this better than anyone. They are losing. The Russians paraded a Leopard tank that the West had donated to Ukraine earlier this week. Putin is going to be deploying tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus in coming weeks. So, yes, there is a certain degree of nervousness here with regards to how this counteroffensive is going to go. But more importantly, what is Putin capable of doing? Will he deploy a tactical nuclear weapon? Because there is a view that we are dealing with a lunatic. And you know better than anyone, the Soviet military doctrine, which hasn't changed now under the Russian Federation, which is they don't care how many people they kill or are killed in battle. They only care about the military objective. So you are dealing with an industrial military machine in the case of the Russians, who will stop at nothing to achieve Putin's aims, which are to destroy Ukraine, to reimpose the Russian Empire. And, the perfect example of this is destroying that dam. I mean, that killed Russian soldiers, the explosion. I mean, it washed Russian soldiers away to the point where they're washing up on the beach in Odessa. So it's killed Russian soldiers. It's killed people on both sides. One side of the river is controlled by the Ukrainians. The other side of the river is controlled by the Russians. It's killing everyone. So the Russians don't care. They only care about destroying Ukraine. And I think people in the West need to understand just how psychotic and ghastly the Russians are behaving in Ukraine.
That is a very sobering report from Ukraine, from Tim Smith. Thank you very much for that. I'm now joined by Ukrainian MP, Oleksiy Goncharenko, and Britain's Foreign Secretary in the Callaghan government, Lord Owen. Oleksiy, first of all, what is the feeling in Ukraine as the counteroffensive gets underway?
Hello. I'm not a military person, and I think it's too early to give any conclusions. It's coming. Today we have clear successes on the battlefield near Zaporizhia. So some of our villages are already liberated. And I think we will need several days or weeks more to be more clear about the real result.
And tell us, if you would, about the catastrophe of the demolition of the dam, the results upon the people.
That is absolutely awful and devastating. I've seen everything by my own eyes. I was there. We now giving help to people there, like the whole country is trying to support these people. That is a catastrophe of a planetary scale. For your understanding, 100 miles from this place in the Black Sea now you can find the whole houses swimming and moving by the waves to the beaches. And unfortunately, not only houses, mines, chemicals, like animals, bodies of animals, like everything. So it's awful catastrophe organized by Russia because they don't care about anything, environment, people, absolutely. And the situation on the left bank of the river, which is controlled by Russia, is so bad because on the right bank, Ukraine organized evacuation, help to people, support. And on the left bank of the river, where Russia controls the ground, there is no any help to people. People are sitting on the roofs of the houses for days. How many are killed, we don't know. It's a real ecocide and genocide.
David Owen, given what we've just heard about the humanitarian catastrophe, do you think Britain as a whole is engaged enough? I was thinking, and this point was made earlier by Alexei on a different channel, that the environmentalists really ought to be out there marching, oughtn't they, in protest to this extraordinary catastrophe that has been brought upon Ukraine by this military action by Russia, as we suppose.
Well, it's an ecocide, and it is extremely serious, and we must take it like that. And they have definitely notched up this war in a very dramatic and dangerous way, the Russian government. And therefore, we will have to respond in NATO immediately on areas where we were, if you like, weighing the defensive nature of what we might do. We must come down now in favor of supplying arms and missiles with a range which can help them in their defensive battle. This is a defensive battle. We are not engaged in the war, but we are engaged in trying to ensure that Ukraine survives what have been two invasions.
David, what is the next stage of ramping up NATO supplies to Ukraine? What are the vehicles or aircraft that you would see on the next list to be given to them?
Well, the F-1 aircraft was the key issue, and President Biden has always shown reluctance to cross that barrier because he fears, obviously, that the aircraft could unwittingly stray into attacking Russia. But I think myself that judgment, which was a very sensible and wise one, may have to be urgently reassessed. And there are some other aspects of weaponry with missiles with a longer range, which we may have to look at very carefully and quickly. There's no doubt about NATO's arguments and decisions about that. A lot will depend on President Biden. He is the person who is arbitrating, if you like, on never getting into a third world war. But I don't think we need to take these threats from Russia about using nuclear weapons as anything more than threats. And I think they must know that if they pass that threshold, America has made it quite clear, at that stage they would enter into it, not by exchanging nuclear weapons, but by using conventional weapons. Now, we must not cross that barrier. This must not be allowed to become a third world war. But the way to stop that is a decisive response to this ecocide. The flooding of the territory, incidentally, I think has hurt Russia in some respects. But where they are fighting, and we heard the earlier report of fighting, they're not affected by this. And that is going to be a very difficult struggle, and the Ukrainians know about this. We must stop getting too much into the detail. They're not going to divulge their strategy. We must trust them to make the best decisions and help them in every way we can. And you mentioned public opinion, Britain. Look, I think the British people are fully behind it. I mean, for the last year, my wife and I have had in our garden cottage an Ukrainian family of 5. They went back, amazingly brave, going back because they felt that their 2-year-old son needed a father. Now, these are courageous people, and I believe the British people recognize that and are prepared to see their government give every assistance short of involving ourselves in a war.